Welcome back to Fast Market on the TD Ameritrade Network. I'm Tom White, joined by my co-host Kevin Hinks. But let's bring in our next guest for our cash tag segment, and that's Megan Brantley, the Vice President of Research at LikeFolio. Megan, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, guys.
All right, we're talking McDonald's. You know, this is like a stalwart. It's down less than the overall market. It pays a great dividend. But what kind of data are you seeing? There's so many chains out there selling burgers now that I don't get it. I know it's scale and it's inexpensive food, but what kind of data are you seeing? Is it positive?
Yeah, so whenever we look at McDonald's, I think that the data that we're leading off with you guys right now is consumer happiness. And part of the reason that we're doing this is because, you know, as you mentioned, consumers have a lot of choices whenever they, you know, are looking for fast food or they're looking to go, you know, drive through and grab something really quick, grab a burger. And we see McDonald's actually making some improvements there. On a year-over-year perspective, McDonald's sentiment has increased by about 3 points. And what this means is, you know, whenever you look at this chart, you see them and you're like, okay, they're kind of in the mix with all of these other fast food restaurants. Obviously, we put Shack on just to give some a frame of reference for what these fast casual chains, like how they typically perform when it comes to consumer happiness. But I think that, you know, this 3-point improvement really places McDonald's as the leader versus the other large fast food chains that we're following, you know, Yum brands, including things like Taco Bell and, you know, Wendy's. And I think if you look at this on a big picture perspective of all of these names on this chart, if you were to put it on a pie chart of consumer demand, McDonald's would comprise over half of that pie chart. So to see a consumer happiness level around 64% positive and to start to see some positive traction in that direction for McDonald's, that does has us leaning, you know, slightly positive for this name.
You know, Megan, the biggest lie that I believe told in the United States of America is, oh, I never eat at McDonald's. Everyone eats at McDonald's, right? Everyone likes to say they don't, but everyone does, right? And one thing that is never recorded when we compare fast food chains, and you've got Shake Shack, Jack in the Box, Wendy's, Yum brands, what no one compares to is price points. And none of these other names on your list here can touch McDonald's price points, right? I mean, it is, without a doubt, the cheapest place to get a meal, maybe in this country. So the fact that they're growing and their margins went to 32.5% this year, net margins. That is unbelievable for them to do what they do on that scale and keep doing it well. You know, there's a reason that this stock looks as good as it does, even though it just corrected pretty highly. But Megan, at any point during LikeFolio's studies of this, and I get it, I'm surprised that some of the others aren't higher, frankly, than McDonald's, especially Shake Shack. I mean, but that's a high ticket item for Shake Shack. Do you guys ever compare like ticket sizes with some of these companies? Because I would be willing to guess that McDonald's is 33% cheaper than Shake Shack or even Wendy's. Megan?
Yeah, I think you're definitely right. I think that one of the areas that we try to key into whenever we look at, you know, the price point at least, is a lot of times we start to see that come into play in consumer happiness. And so what our data shows is that McDonald's, you know, obviously has picked a right kind of channel to operate with its own consumers in that price, how it's pricing its menu items, because it's improved by about 3 points on a year-over-year basis. And I know that the company even acknowledged that they have hiked prices some, and I still think it falls below a lot of the competitors. So obviously the company has some pricing power. Whenever we look at qualitative mentions, I think one of the key drivers is just the convenience of McDonald's. We're starting to see a lot of traction and a lot of consumer happiness with its app. I know that this is a main driver of consumer loyalty. I think it has over 20 million, you know, active loyal members that are, you know, do shop at McDonald's, whether they want to admit it or not. As you point out, there's so many people, you know, it's so easy to go through McDonald's. But when we look at those app mentions specifically, we have them actually up more than double on a year-over-year basis. So I think that they're doing a really good job of, you know, getting consumers from a digital perspective and engaging them in that environment, and then leveraging that curbside pickup and that drive-through experience to improve the overall experience when a consumer visits McDonald's, to make it as easy and as quick as possible to swing through and pick up what you want and then get on your way.
Yeah, and Kevin, I have not been to a McDonald's in over 10 years, but that's not saying that I wouldn't stop on a road trip at a Wendy's or something else. McDonald's
road trip, thank you.
McDonald's would be the last place that I would go, and that's why I haven't been there for over a decade. But that being said, there's other options.
You just proved my point, Tom.
Yeah, there's other
my point.
There's other options out there. Now, Megan, when you guys look at this, the happiness numbers are right in the middle there as far as comparisons with some of their competitors. But at the same time, when you look at consumer sentiment data points on this, like maybe I'm going to go to McDonald's, and you've seen the rise in inflation, and McDonald's is still at that lower price point that many people can afford, more than the Shake Shacks and some of the other higher end chains. Are you seeing that tick up due to the inflationary pressures where, hey, I don't have enough money to buy $20 worth of fast food, so I'll go to McDonald's and spend $8?
Yeah, I mean, I think that that's definitely a pro in McDonald's column that they can count, that they are seen as a more affordable option. And I think that the perceived quality of McDonald's food has improved over the last few years. You know, a couple of years ago, we talked whenever they started using, the fresh meat in their quarter pounders and things like that instead of frozen. That was a big move to improve the overall quality perception. And I got to say, if you haven't tried McDonald's, you ought to try their breakfast, because that's a huge driver, something that consumers really like. I think that's where McDonald's really elevates itself. That was another move whenever they went to, offering the full day breakfast items that consumers really liked, and that really drove those visits to McDonald's. So I think that McDonald's does understand its consumers. That's why it's doing these things, and that's why it's making these changes. And it's definitely contributing to, that higher sentiment. And from our perspective, when we look at overall purchase intent mentions, over the last few years, we've kind of seen a shift where we're seeing an increased average ticket size versus necessarily increased traffic. And we're actually seeing that traffic about flat year over year, but that's an improvement for us. So, we're starting to see things, normalize in that sense, while McDonald's is able to, raise those menu prices and increase sales that way. So that's some nice leverage that the company has moving forward as well.
And Megan, do you have any data, or have you seen anything from sentiment or from consumers? Because McDonald's is actually digging in and going into the metaverse, right? Where you can actually use it for something, because McDonald's is actually, I think they figured it out, where you can go into the metaverse and order from your local McDonald's and they'll deliver it. So if you got those VR goggles on, you can actually order it. Have you seen any data from LikeFolio that states that, hey, this is actually picking up some traction?
We haven't seen that yet. We do see a lot of happy app users. I don't think that we've seen a lot of metaverse mentions pop up in our data recently. Another thing that's driving purchases of late, at least, are these seasonal items that they have that McDonald's does such a good job of leveraging. Most recently, their Shamrock Shake, another menu item I could recommend you try, Tom, if you're trying to give McDonald's a shot. But we are seeing some traction there. So they do a good job of leveraging these seasonal items. I know another thing that shocked me whenever I started looking at mentions, and this is more on the news side of things, they have something called a cilantro sundae in some parts of Asia. So that sounds really bizarre to me, but they do a good job of kind of, localizing the menu on a global scale. So McDonald's definitely, from our perspective at least, is showing signs of improvement. I know that they're not set to report earnings, but if we were to have an earnings score for McDonald's, it'd be about a 17 right now. So for us, anything in that 0 to 20 range is neutral, but it's definitely on the leaning bullish side of neutral, just because we're starting to see things improve as consumers get out and about, and especially as consumers are looking to find those deals and maybe save some money.
Right. And no earnings there, but positive to neutral, slightly neutral bias on that. Hey, Shamrock Shake and a McRib, those things come out. Ben Watson from our network is all over those things when those come out. I think he just tweeted out a picture of Shamrock Shake. Now I'm hungry. All right, Megan, great stuff as always. Have a great weekend.
Thanks, guys. You too.
That's Megan Brantley, the Vice President of Research at LikeFolio.